Hello, and welcome to Books from Your Therapist, a podcast where we talk to therapists and mental health practitioners about their mental health related book recommendations. By mixing book talk with mental health, we hope to open up the conversation around books your therapist may have suggested and make them more accessible.
This podcast is not a substitute for mental health care. It's for educational and entertainment purposes only. I'm Amanda Throckmorton, a marriage and family therapist in California.
And I'm Tara Kremen, and I work in the book industry in Toronto, in Canada. In this episode, we're talking to Jenet Dove, LPC. The books we chat about are Jenet's own written book, Turn the Volume Down on Imposter Syndrome Journal, and I Thought It Was Just Me, But It Isn't, by Brené Brown.
Jenet Dove is a therapist and writer who helps people connect with their confidence and sense of self-worth to find their inner peace. In the Turn Down the Volume on Imposter Syndrome Journal, she unpacks 7 key components on overcoming imposter syndrome and shares personal anecdotes and guidance alongside space for you to explore your own experiences. Jenet's approach is compassionate and real. It's not about fixing yourself, but leaning in to see your strengths clearly and own the space you already deserve.
Dr. Brené Brown is the leading authority on the power of vulnerability and has inspired thousands through her top-selling books. Based on 7 years of groundbreaking research and hundreds of interviews, I Thought It Was Just Me shines a long overdue light on an important truth. Our imperfections are what connect us to each other and to our humanity. Our vulnerabilities are not weaknesses. They are powerful reminders to keep our hearts open and our minds open to the reality that we're all in this together. We had a really great conversation. It was wonderful to learn about Jenet's journey into becoming a therapist and writing this journal, and about how her work in perfectionism kind of touches on some of Dr. Brown's work as well in this book, all about shame and about how connection is the cure. Is cure the right word? Can I say cure on a podcast?
It's a helpful. Well, it's helpful.
Yeah.
Hello, welcome, Jeanette, to Books from Your Therapist.
Hi, I'm excited to be here.
We were hoping you could just share a little bit about yourself for our listeners. Like, who are you, your licensure, anything else about your identity you'd love to share?
Yeah, of course. So, my name is Jenet Dove. I am a licensed psychotherapist, LPC by credentialed. I'm based out of Houston, Texas, and my practice supports overfunctioning perfectionists who struggle with burnout, shame, and depression.
I'm so curious why you decided to become a therapist and then also why that sort of became your focus.
Yeah, so my journey to becoming a therapist is very nonlinear. Like, I did not start out in psychology at all. My degree from UT Austin, my undergraduate degree is actually in advertising. And so I did advertising for a year out in LA. I worked at a firm, and that was not my cup of tea. I found out pretty quickly. And so I pivoted. The power of the pivot is so important. And so I pivoted to education and wanted to really find something that I was really passionate about. I stayed in education for a while. So I taught second grade for about 7 years out in Houston. And about 3 to 5 years into that, I realized I wanted to do something different. I wanted to work for myself. I found that I was really enjoying conversations with my colleagues and really enjoying like helping the parents through like difficult situations and whatnot. So I found that I enjoyed working with adults more than actually working with kids. And that kind of is what led me into the path of psychology, counseling. And in 2016, I graduated with my master's in education from University of Houston, did my licensure hours at a group practice for about 4 years, and then pivoted to private practice. And so I've been in private practice for 3 years now.
I love the coupling of the education experience first and then sort of moving into this work. And
Mm.
I don't know if we've actually really had anyone on the podcast that's talked about that. I personally always felt like my mom was a teacher. Tara and I actually met as teachers in South Korea.
Oh,
I've
wow.
I've worked in education in some regard and always felt like I was naturally a teacher,
Yeah.
but was like not as drawn to the classroom and felt like this work as a therapist was a little bit of that hat, but in a
Yeah.
different way. So I
Yeah.
love to hear that that was your connection and sort of your journey there and also the jump from maybe working with kids into working with adults and what a shift that is.
Yeah. Yeah. It actually just kind of all happened very naturally. And I agree with you. I think that there's something about that being an educator that kind of lends itself naturally to becoming a therapist.
hmm And everyone has such a different path. I think we haven't, I don't know if we've had anyone on here, I mean, myself included, that didn't jump from and study psychology in undergrad and like follow this path into becoming a therapist. Everyone has such a fun path to get there. And I
Mm.
actually think that's what makes people, what I feel like good therapists, because they have this other life experience. And to your point, I love that the power of the pivot
Yeah.
is so true. So we connected on social media.
Mm.
I think I found you on TikTok maybe.
Yes.
How has how has it been incorporating the socials into your practice?
I find it to be a very liberating creative outlet. As
hmm
someone who struggles with perfectionism, it's like a way for me to be in defiance of my perfectionism because I am putting myself out there. I'm being very vulnerable with my content, and it's just open to the world to pick apart in ways, you know. I'm very grateful that everything has been received positively and my following is increasing. And I just really enjoy having another avenue to touch people with psychology and therapy talk, etc.
And your videos are edited so beautifully, and I was definitely drawn to you, and so it's always fun to connect on that avenue because I think that is one of the benefits. You know, obviously there's a lot of drawbacks to social media, but I do feel like that's a benefit to sort of connecting. Like you live in Houston, I live in California. Like I think it's so cool to hear and it gets me excited about other people doing this work in other areas and just wanting to highlight and bring them on and I the piece about maybe tapering down the perfectionism, it feels really true too. And actually it reminds me of the story of this weekend. Someone had asked me like, how's the podcast going? And I was like, it's good. Like it's a practice and, like loving the message overall and like allowing myself to show up in these things however I'm showing up. Because like we can edit them, but sometimes I say things I'm like, ugh, like I wish I would have said that
Mhm.
differently. But the overall message and the overall experience and outcome is what I want. And then the
Right,
little pieces are kind of like, ugh, but I can sit with it, you know?
right, right.
You've talked a little bit about kind of working with perfectionists. Is that kind of primarily the people that you work with, or
Yes.
any other areas? Or I guess that kind of opens up a whole range of things of people that are kind of maybe I don't want to say struggling with perfectionism, but that lean toward being perfectionists.
Yeah, yeah. And so it's a profile that lends itself to those who struggle with burnout, who struggle with shame, who struggle with boundaries. And so they come to me, my clients typically come to me when they're like just overwhelmed, exhausted, confused on how they got to this place of where they are in life right now. And we spend a lot of time like just getting clarity on that. And so, yeah, perfectionism is definitely my area of expertise.
And do you primarily work online, or do you see clients in person as well?
Yeah, my practice is 100% virtual.
Nice, nice. So you offer something that's called the Daring Way in addition to the
Yeah.
clinical work that you do. Could you tell us about this?
Yeah, so the Daring Way is a curriculum that was created by Dr. Brené Brown, and it is all about showing up, being seen, and living brave. And so it walks clients through a process of finding an area of their life where they truly want to show up and be seen. And we walk through all the barriers and negative messages that could be coming up and getting in our way from truly showing up in life the way that we want to be. And so it's a really powerful curriculum, and I'm excited that I'm certified in it and able to offer that to my clients as well, if it's a good fit for them.
Now, your book choices are making so much sense now that you've paired them together, and I'm
Mhm.
excited to jump into both of them. And before we do, was there anything else that you'd like to share about yourself, either professionally or personally, before we get going?
No, that kind of sums it up.
All right. Well, let's jump into your journal then, which
Yes.
is Turn Down the Volume on Imposter Syndrome Journal by Jenet Dove. What inspired you to write this journal?
Yes. So full transparency, imposter syndrome is not my niche. Like my niche is perfectionism, 100%. I wrote the journal in response to a request that I received in 2024 to keynote a luncheon for the Women's Council of Entrepreneurs out in Texas, in Houston. And so they wanted me to speak on imposter syndrome. They thought it would be a good topic for their luncheon that year. And so I decided to just kind of rise to the challenge. I knew some things about imposter syndrome, and I know that there's some overlap with perfectionism as well. And so I just kind of dove into some research and really kind of stuck my head into it. And I decided to create a journal as a companion to my keynotes. So those who attended the keynote were able to get a copy of the journal. And it turned out that there was a request for more. And so I ended up just creating that digital copy and making it available online for others to receive as well.
Wow, that's so cool to think, like you stated, this isn't what is it wasn't necessarily my niche, but
Mm,
I just dug in, right?
yeah.
Yeah, well, how cool is that? And so who would you say, obviously the journal at the time was written for the attendees of this conference, but overall, who would you say this journal is written for?
Yeah, anyone who struggles with self-doubt. Yeah,
Mhm.
anyone who struggles with negative thoughts, has a strong inner critic, uh, I would say that this journal is for you.
And if someone is not familiar with the term imposter syndrome, can you explain sort of what that is?
Yeah, so imposter syndrome is this psychological phenomenon where individuals who are extremely successful and accomplished doubt their abilities and fear being exposed as a fraud, despite evidence of all of their success. So everyone can see their greatness but them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm like, oh, I can feel that in my body as you say that.
Yeah.
Does it tie in with some of the perfectionist work that you've done at all, or is it mostly, or are they kind of the same, or how does that tie
They're
together?
not the same. So perfectionism is more so rooted in shame. And
Mm.
so it's a fear of really being seen. It's this idea that if I have to look perfectly, behave perfectly, think perfectly, dress perfectly, show up perfectly in order to receive love and acceptance.
Mm,
And so it's more of a belief system. It's
mm,
not a diagnosis, it's a belief system. Whereas imposter syndrome is more so this fear of being exposed as a fraud. But there is also an element of shame in that as well. And so there is definitely some overlap. I think in perfectionism, the fear and imposter syndrome, they're both fear driven.
mm.
I wanted to say, so for those on the video, I have my Kobo with the journal that I have downloaded and was able to mark up, which I was super excited about doing. It was my first time using kind of like a journal on a digital e-reader. Yeah, so that was very fun. It was very well laid out. I really enjoyed it. And part that kind of jumped out in the, because each section has, you're kind of describing different areas around imposter syndrome. And you wrote that fear pushes us into one of two responses. There's
Yeah.
the over preparation or the procrastination. And
Yeah.
it's, yeah, I was wondering if you could speak to these responses a little bit.
Yeah. In imposter syndrome, the trigger begins when you are presented with a task or some type of project that you need to complete. And that triggers a fear response where you either go into procrastination, meaning you are taking forever to get started, or you go into over preparation. And you're doing this as a way to overcompensate to kind of overcompensate for that fear of being exposed. And so it's really driven by those negative thoughts of, oh my God, why did they pick me for this task? Oh my God, I'm going to be exposed. I'm going to be one mistake away from losing my job. We get stuck in that kind of crippling thought cycle. And so it either keeps us from getting started or it causes us to over prepare, over prepare, over prepare.
Yeah, it was interesting because it's kind of almost like the fight, flight, or freeze. I was thinking about that in a
Hmm.
certain way that it's kind of similar with the procrastination and the over preparation, just from the non-therapy side here, learning about my nervous system more than I ever have before. But I mentioned your journal is presented in different sections.
Yes.
So how did you go about like deciding which sections? And I wonder if you could give us a little bit of a guide or how can somebody use the sections through feelings of imposter syndrome?
Yeah, so I did, like I said, I did a lot of research. There are experts in this field, such as Dr. Lisa O'Bray Austin, who is like, in my opinion, the leading expert on imposter syndrome. And so I did a lot of diving into her work and just through some of my own experience with imposter syndrome as well. I kind of laid out what I believed would be helpful for individuals who struggle with this phenomenon to, kind of unpack and process and tease out some of their thoughts and feelings as they're working through it. And so we start off with just the basic understanding of what is imposter syndrome, like I defined earlier. And then I have participants go into really identifying what their negative thoughts are, because our thoughts are what really kind of keeps us stuck in the cycle of imposter syndrome, that gets us stuck in that kind of fearful response. And so kind of helping individuals identify those negative thoughts, and then we go through challenging those negative thoughts, because I think a lot of times we believe because we have thoughts that those thoughts are real and that they are just 100% true. But the reality is we have over 1,000 thoughts a day, and we can decide which thoughts that we want to buy into, which thoughts we want to give time to, and which thoughts that we want to negate and challenge. I think it's important for people to be able to understand that idea. And then we kind of go into celebrating achievements, because those who struggle with imposter syndrome really have a difficult time internalizing their achievements. We tend to minimize our wins while we place a lot of emphasis on our shortcomings. And that kind of just perpetuates the belief system that we're going to be exposed as a fraud. And so I create space for individuals to be able to really map out some of their wins, really identify the steps, list out the steps that they took to get those achievements so they can really begin internalizing those wins. Then we talk a little bit about setting realistic goals, because those of us who struggle with imposter syndrome tend to set lofty goals, and that can also contribute to this idea of being exposed as a fraud. So making sure that we're setting goals that are realistic, that are smart. And then we go into talking about building our support system, because healing happens in community. And a lot of times we cannot do this work on our own. And so I have readers get kind of critical about what their current support system looks like, and making sure that they have people in their support system that really can, that they can really go through and really lean on as they're unpacking some of their concerns with imposter syndrome. And then we've rounded out with committing to self-care.
I appreciate you going into such depth about that. The inner critic, the sort of the identifying and challenging negative beliefs piece, like really stood out to me.
Hmm.
And I know you just spoke on it a little bit, but I was wondering if you had any examples of like common negative beliefs that you see others holding.
Yeah, it's really the beliefs are really centered around the like fear of being exposed. And
Mm,
so it's like, I'm not qualified, I'm not good enough, I'm going to be exposed, I'm one mistake away from this all falling apart. And so that voice can get extra loud, and that voice is what kind of drives us into those two fear responses. And so that's why it's really important to be able to pause and actually fact check some of the
hmm
thoughts that you're having.
hmm I thought this was interesting because I recently started working with therapists in training as a clinical supervisor, and
Oh, wow.
And, imposter syndrome, I think, especially when you're starting, is so, I just remember it being so giant. Like I felt like it was sitting on my chest, and I got into a conversation with someone around it, and there was a piece of it where I felt like for me, there's a built-in imposter syndrome that I actually feel like some of it is a good thing, especially in our field, because for me, it kind of drives me to be forever learning and forever sort of like seeking out information. But the way I hold it in my body is like if I'm over fixating on it, or in your words, like over preparing or procrastinating, then I know it's moved into a space that is not supportive. But if
Yeah.
it's a questioning of like, oh, could I be, doing this better, or learning about this challenge my client is holding better, or who they are and parts of their identity better, is like for me something that feels like built into this role.
Yeah. That's really insightful.
Yeah, but when it becomes anxious, I'm like, okay, this isn't helpful.
Yeah. So there's a part of it that feels like it's healthy striving,
Yeah,
right, in
exactly.
the beginning. And
Mm-hmm.
then you're able to kind of realize or identify when, okay, I need to slow down a little bit. It's
Mm-hmm.
becoming a little maladaptive.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
I like that the journal mentions like two impactful ways to help with people that are struggling with imposter syndrome. So you sort of highlight like physical ways and like mental health care, oh,
Yeah.
mental self-care,
Yeah.
even though I guess
Yeah.
those are the same thing. Could you give some examples of this about how people can maybe help get through some imposter syndrome?
Yeah. And so at the end of the day, we just need to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves. And so that's why I included that piece, committing to self-care at the end of the journal. And so when we talk about physical self-care, we're talking about physical activity, making sure that we're moving our bodies. As we know, that increases the positive brain chemicals, the happy chemicals in our brain, and all of those contribute a little bit more to having positive self-thoughts. And then the mental self-care is making sure that you are talking to your therapist, that you're working with your therapist on some of the negative thoughts, some of the limitations that are coming up for you with imposter syndrome, doing meditations, journaling, all of those positive things that we know really help us when we are struggling with something.
Yeah, I think having the examples, it's always kind of helpful because it can
Yeah.
be, when you just hear, move your body, you're like, okay, cool, but like how? So
Yeah.
having some solid examples is helpful, and especially with the mental self-care because
Yeah.
it can be hard to imagine that. You're just like, yeah, like take the time. Yeah, so having examples, I think, is helpful.
Yeah. And moving your body doesn't have to be hard. I think that
Right.
one of the best things that you can do is just go outside and go for a walk.
Yeah.
And as I tell my clients all the time, just go for a walk, 30
Hmm.
minutes, 20, 30 minutes. That can do you wonders every day.
The examples are nice too because I know what I do intuitively for myself, but sometimes it's nice to be like, what do other people do? Or like, like, is there something I haven't quite experienced or been drawn to that is in this journal?
I think sometimes as well, it's like you could, I'm somebody that definitely is a procrastinator and has always been, but sometimes it can maybe not be the worst if I'm procrastinating for a little bit of self-care, as long as it's not
Yeah.
too much in the other way. But it was like, yeah, it was maybe being able to identify the difference. So we have, I think those examples of like how people can kind of help get through imposter syndrome are really beneficial from this journal. But what else do you hope that clients would get the most out of anyone that's using this?
Just the understanding that you're not alone.
Mm.
Like this is something that a lot of people are struggling with. I open up the book with the forward and I talk a little bit about my personal experience with imposter syndrome and how it's affected me and leaning on my support system, going through some of those steps that I actually listed in the journal has really helped me with my own difficulties with it. And so I just want people to know that they're not alone. This is a real thing that you're dealing with, and hopefully this is a resource that can help you move you a little bit through it.
Nice. And do you have any ambitions to write other journals? Like maybe the perfectionist journal is something that you
Yeah.
could put out there?
I'm thinking about it. I'm toying around with that idea of some other journals around perfectionism, maybe around boundaries as well.
Ooh.
And so we'll see.
Okay, I love that. I love that. Did you enjoy the writing process of this?
I did enjoy the writing process. I really enjoyed creating the journal prompts, like really thinking through. I mean, I think that comes from like a little bit of the educator part of me, like curriculum writing,
Hmm.
having to write out like lesson plans. So I really enjoyed like thinking through like the order of things and like really thinking through how somebody could unpack certain things through the exercises.
Nice. Well, I look forward to seeing future journals from you.
Yeah.
Very helpful. So let's jump into book two, which was the book of your choosing, which I think paired super
Yes.
well with your journal. I thought it was just me, but it isn't, by Brené Brown. Really mouthful of a book title. But can you tell us why you chose this book?
Yes. So this was one of the very first books that I read by Dr. Brené Brown. And it was the first time that I received language that really highlighted my experience with shame. And I think that just was so monumental for me in my healing journey to have language. Like, this is what I've been experiencing. This is what I've been feeling. Like, these are the words that
Mm.
describe it. And I think that is just so powerful. And so that's why I picked that book. I hope everyone is able to like get their hands on it because shame is such a universal emotion that is not talked about enough. As she mentions quite a bit in the book, like people just don't want to talk about it. But I think it's such a every we deal with it every day, and so I think it's important to have language around it.
Yeah, I agree. It's like such a like shameful thing that because it's such a negative connotation around it that we don't speak about it at all. But yeah, I thought this book was really, really great. For anyone that hasn't read it or isn't familiar, could you give us a little overview of the book for listeners?
Yeah, and so it really just dives into the idea of the experience with shame and building shame resilience. It allows people to really understand that you're not alone in your experiences. Like, this is, again, a universal emotion. And what's beautiful about the book is that it helps walk you through building that shame resilience, which is, I think, important for us when we're dealing with such a visceral emotion.
Like, how would you describe shame? Just like, how would you describe what it is
Yeah.
from a, well, how does Brene Brown describe what it is?
Yeah, I'm going to read the definition
Yeah,
There
yeah,
we
just
go.
yeah.
There we
because
go.
it's such a, it can be a difficult emotion to describe. And I think
Hmm.
she just nails it beautifully. So she says, shame is the intensely painful feeling or experience of believing we are flawed and therefore unworthy of acceptance and belonging.
Mm.
Yeah. And so that's really also what is at the root of perfectionism, which is why I was drawn to this book so much as well. It's that fear of truly being seen, the truly being vulnerable. And if I do show up as my true self, then I risk I risk rejection.
Mm. Which really just goes against our wiring, right? As
Hmm.
humans, where we crave and actually need that connection and acceptance. And in that description, the word unworthy really jumps out to me. Like I'm like, oh, I can, it just
Yeah.
yeah. And she also describes it as a full contact emotion.
Yes.
What does this mean to you when you hear that or read that?
Yeah, I mean, it really is a full contact emotion, meaning like it hijacks your body. Like you feel it. It actually triggers your sympathetic nervous system. And so you are actually in fight or flight. It activates the same part of that nervous system when you're experiencing shame. And so your body is experiencing shame as if there is a threat. And so
Mm, mm.
that is what is I feel like she is describing when she talks about it being a full contact emotion.
Yeah, it's definitely there was something around her putting the language around how you're feeling it in your body that made me
Hmm.
think about shame in a way that I hadn't considered at all before. Yeah, it was super interesting. And Brown writes about like empathy as almost being the
Yeah,
opposite of shame.
yeah. It's
So
the antidote.
Yeah, can you talk about that? Like, it's the
Yeah,
other end, it's
yeah,
the yin to the yang.
Mhm.
yeah. It's definitely the antidote. It's what minimizes it. It's what lessens it. And so it's this idea of finding spaces where you can truly be heard and you can truly be seen, and having people really validate your experiences, really put words about, I see you, you're not alone in this, and I get you. And I think that when that is done intentionally through empathy, that it can be very powerful in reducing that painful response.
Yeah.
There was an animation that was a Brené Brown animation on empathy. Did you ever see that?
Yes, yes,
Years ago, and I remember it floating around the internet, and it was so perfect. I felt like it just, yeah, I think at the time when her book started coming out, to your point, it really put things to names for a lot of people that were like,
yeah,
oh wow, I can understand this now.
absolutely.
You've mentioned the idea of shame resilience.
Hmm.
And can you explain what this is and maybe give some examples? Because it makes sense as you're reading the book, but when you just see the phrase shame resilience, it can maybe be a little bit
Yeah.
abstract to grasp.
Because shame is such that visceral response that kind of sends us into fight or flight, we can behave in ways that are uncharacteristic of ourselves when we are experiencing shame. And that causes us to go down a shame spiral. It causes us to engage with others in a way that may be maladaptive. The idea is that when we are experiencing shame, we need to be able to move through it in a way that's more authentic and more aligned with ourselves. And so building that resilience to experiencing shame is what allows us to really connect with others when we're experiencing it in a more healthier way, and
Yeah,
ourselves, connect with others and connect with ourselves.
I think it's nice language around like just using the word resilience instead of it being like, you're going to stop feeling shame or
Yeah,
even around her definition of shame of it being a belief. I like those sprinklings of language that you can change. Like, so you can
yeah,
shift beliefs and you can become more resilient to things. It's not so black
yeah.
and white as like you're going to stop feeling shame along
Yeah,
that.
no, we're never gonna stop feeling shame. It's always it's a just like any other emotion that we can have access to, our bodies can have access to. But because it's such that visceral, painful response that causes us to sometimes behave in ways that are again uncharacteristic of ourselves. And she gives like plenty of examples in here of like how people behaved in ways that are uncharacteristic of themselves, like lashing out at family members, lying, becoming aggressive, withdrawing, isolating themselves. It's important to be able to one identify when you're experiencing that shame cycle, and then move through it, seek connection from the right people so you can receive that empathy and receive that validation of your experiences to help really reduce and minimize that painful feeling.
The connection pieces, I mean, it's always so important, arguably like the most important, I think.
Hmm.
But she talks about like connection's an important way to remove feelings of shame, and she writes about this concept of the vulnerability hangover, which is a
Yes.
concept that I remember so distinctly from when I first read this book like 10 years
Yes.
ago, and I like arguably was like one of the biggest takeaways that I saw kind of talked
Yes.
about like in the greater like
Same.
exactly. It was like, oh, wow, like this is a great term. I hear it all the time now.
Yes.
For those that didn't know about this from 10 years ago, like how would you describe what this is and how we get beyond it?
Yeah, so the vulnerability hangover happens when you are attempting to be vulnerable, because that's what shame resilience requires us to be a little bit vulnerable when we are connecting with those who are safe. When you attempt to be vulnerable, and then the aftermath of that is, oh my God, I've shared too much.
Mm,
Oh my God, they've saw my true self, And now that's scary. This is scary. And now I need to go hide.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it kind of sends you into this cycle of I did too much, I am too much, I need to back away, retreat
Mhm.
now. And it's another one of those things that you have to build resilience to. She talks about vulnerability is not going on social media and blasting your personal business to everyone. Vulnerability happens in really small, intimate moments with people who are safe, that you've identified that are safe. Making sure that we are connecting with the right people, then making sure that you're just really taking care of yourself, being kind to yourself. She talks about self-compassion a lot as a way of helping minimize some of that hangover and helping minimize some of the just the shame that comes up in general. Just being kind to yourself, talking to yourself the way that you would talk to a friend who was in the exact same situation.
Mm. I think about it as so much more relational now than maybe I did 10 years ago when I first like heard the term
Mm,
of like instead of internalizing it as, oh, I went too far in the
mm,
sharing of myself. When I experience that now, for me, the question comes up of like, was that the right person to share with? Was like, and nothing against that person, but maybe this is like a capacity of theirs
yeah,
or this is an experience in my life that they don't have experience with, and it's helpful information for me to like move forward. Like maybe this is parts of
absolutely,
myself I don't share with them, and it doesn't
absolutely.
mean they're not my friend, but like this is just maybe something they can't hold, and that's also okay.
Hmm.
Yeah, so this in this piece specifically, that has been like the biggest shift for me reading this the second time, like 10 years
Yeah.
older and being like, oh, okay, like I'm not going to take this on as like I have to run away in my hangover. It's like it makes me curious about the connection.
Yeah, the connection. Is it the right person? Was this the right space?
Hmm.
And it also doesn't mean that I stop attempting to be vulnerable in the future,
Right.
right?
Exactly.
It's just a way for me. It's data collection.
Sure.
And so I get to decide what to do with the information that I collected from that experience.
Hmm. Yeah, for me it's like the good to know. Okay.
Yeah.
Good to know.
I
Um,
I thought that I came up with this phrase. I have to embarrassingly admit that. So like when I've been like dating over the past few years and like definitely what you're thinking about, Amanda, like especially as you're if it's like a fresh relationship, you're getting to know people. And I started using that phrase and like so when I read the book and I was like, what? And obviously I heard it on the internet and it got into my brain and I have not invented this, but it put words so succinctly on like I think we're like you were saying, Amanda, as well, I stopped internalizing it and started kind of think, okay, that wasn't the right person to sort of share
Right.
that for right now to build like whatever connection, lesson learned, gonna move on the next time. But yeah, I thought it was really funny when it jumped out and I was like, wait, what? This isn't my phrase.
Sorry to break it to you, Tara.
I know. I cannot take credit for that, but she captures
Yeah.
it so well. Yeah, I love yeah, I just loved that section.
What else do you hope that readers take away from this book?
Ooh, similar to what I said with my journal, is just that you're not alone. You're not
Hmm.
alone. I think a lot of times, like we feel so alone in our experiences, and the reality is that our experiences are more common than not. This is one of the books that I like. I see it with my clients all the time. Is that they feel like they're the only person who has gone through XYZ, and or the only person who experiences shame in these moments and or has behaved in this way, and the reality is that you're not. And once we have like language and once we realize that, oh, this is a universal experience, that can do a lot to help move people through their healing journey. And so that's what I really hope that they get out of the book.
Yeah, there's something about that leaning into the community feel of like, we do all experience this, which can feel
Yes.
so freeing for someone that's feeling alone in this.
Yes,
Mm.
absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for chatting with us today. It was really great to sort of hear about your journal and also just like visit some of Dr. Brené Brown's work. We haven't
Yes.
talked about any of her work on the podcast yet. So I was like, oh, great. Like this is fun to dive into. If any of the listeners are like interested in either working with you or purchasing
Yeah.
the journal or connecting with you in some way, where can they find you online?
Yeah, so you can find me at JenetDove.com. You can also find me on all the socials, TikTok and Instagram at Jenet Dove Counseling.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ladies.
Thanks so much for listening to Books from Your Therapist. If you're interested in the books we talked about, we'll include the links in our show notes. If you'd like to reach out to us with your own recommendations or a mental health practitioner or author interested in coming on to share, you can email us at booksfromyourtherapist@gmail.com.
If you're in California and interested in working with Amanda, you can find her at amandathrockmorton.com. And you can follow us on socials at Books From Your Therapist on Instagram, Threads, and TikTok. And if you'd like, you can follow me on Substack. I am at Tara Kremen.
Happy building your shame resilience.
Happy being open to shifting your beliefs.
Love it.